Welcome back to Cascade Mysteries. In this video, I'm going to share some information about a very recent incident of a pair of Sasquatch hunters. Washington state officials announced Saturday, December 28th, that two men from Oregon who went missing after going on a search for Sasquatch have been found deceased. The men, both from Portland, were reported missing by a family member on Christmas Day and were set to return from searching for the legendary creature in eastern Skamania County on Christmas Eve, according to the county sheriff's office. A search was launched, and a vehicle associated with the two men was found off a road near Willard, Washington. After a 3-day search involving more than 60 people, the bodies of both men, ages 37 and 59 years old, were found in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, located in the southwestern part of Washington state, in a heavily wooded area, according to the Skamania County Sheriff's Office. Their cause of loss of life appears to be because of exposure, based on weather conditions and ill preparedness, the sheriff's office said. The area had faced rounds of snow and rain with temperatures in the 30s across the Cascades in the days leading up to the men being reported missing. The search for the men also took place amid difficult terrain and harsh weather conditions, as crews faced conditions such as freezing temperatures, snow, and high water levels, law enforcement said. Sasquatch, commonly known as Bigfoot, is a large, hairy figure that resembles a human and is thought to live in northwestern parts of the U.S. and Canada. The existence of Sasquatch has been debated for decades, and many have reported sightings of the creature. More than 700 reports of Sasquatch sightings in Washington state have been submitted to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, also known as the BFRO, the group says. In Skamania County, harming Sasquatch is punishable by a $1,000 fine and can include jail time, according to the county's Chamber of Commerce, a law meant to protect the mysterious creature and to prevent hunters with large beards from accidentally getting shot. The Skamania County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue team spent 3 days searching for the missing Portland men who tragically passed away while looking for Sasquatch in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest on Christmas. Just a few hours after the exhaustive search was over, nearly all of the team's rescue equipment was stolen. Skamania County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue is now asking for public donations on GoFundMe and Facebook to help restock the vital supplies, which have been used to save multiple lives within the past few months. As of Monday morning, December 30th, the Search and Rescue Organization has raised more than $12,000 to restock its supplies. While we are proudly affiliated with the Skamania County Sheriff's Office, our Search and Rescue Organization is a completely independent nonprofit, the rescue team wrote on its GoFundMe page. We receive no funding from federal, state, or local governments. Every piece of equipment, every training, and every mission is made possible by generous donations from supporters like you. All of our rescuers are 100% volunteers with no paid staff. The theft occurred on the same night the search for the missing Sasquatch hunters' bodies were recovered from the forest, the rescue team said. The thieves cut through fencing, broke into the team's storage trailer, and made off with nearly every piece of rescue equipment inside. On the evening of the final night of the mission, while our fatigued volunteers were finally resting at home, thieves broke into our storage yard. Skamania County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue said they cut through a 10-foot barbed wire fence and stole nearly everything not bolted down from our equipment trailers. Without its equipment, the team is struggling to remain prepared for future rescues. The stolen equipment includes 1 first responder grade equipment for technical rope rescue, 2 equipment for packaging patients in a litter, 3 an AED, automated external defibrillator, 4 custom wilderness medical kits for remote emergencies, 5 rescue kits for hypothermic patients, 6 generators and other critical tools, 7 projector for training, and other essential rescue equipment. Every piece of equipment is critical to saving lives, all indispensable tools that ensure the safety of both rescuers and those we rescue. Skamania County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue said, "This isn't just gear, it's what ensures we can bring people home from life-threatening situations. Without it, we may not be able to respond to the next emergency, whether it's rescuing someone stranded across a raging river or fallen from a cliff." Now here are a few stories of Sasquatch encounters and sightings from the Cascades in Washington state. Story 1. I had an encounter about 1994 in the summer in the Cascades. There were 2 objects there. I had a 40-pound backpack. I was up by Trout Lake between Big Heart and Little Heart Lake, North Cascades. It was about, a 6 or 8 hour hike back there. Anyway, I saw these 2 objects. I thought they were bears because they were down on all 4s. I sat down to rest a little bit, and I saw these objects. Then all of a sudden I saw them stand up, and I thought it was bears standing up on their hind paws. They were, I imagine, 200 feet away. After they had left, they walked away, and they were 7.5 feet tall, something like that. So when I got my courage up, I went over to where they were to see what they were doing, and there were some wild strawberries and stuff there. They were kind of dark brownish colored. They were not bears. Definitely not bears, because I've shot bears before. I was scared out of my pants. Story 2. I made an observation of a Sasquatch many years ago. It was 2002. I lived in the Portland, Oregon area at that time, and I did a lot of wilderness hiking in the Cascades in Washington state. I decided to go hike to a lake. It was bigger than a pond, but smaller than a lake. It was northwest of Mount Adams and southwest of Mount St. Helens. I had a 4-wheel drive. It took me about 20 miles of driving to get up there, and then a couple miles of hiking. I came in on the southwest corner of this lake, and at the very north end there was a Sasquatch peeling bark off of a tree. I was frightened at first, but then I just got down on my knees at the shoreline and drank some water. It watched me take the drink. Then I sat down and rested for a while. It finished off with the tree bark and then walked away. Then it was time for me to go too. I didn't know if it was going to charge at me, so I left. Story 3. I've told my family this story a couple times and I get some weird looks, but it really stands out for me, so I will share it with you. It is the only sighting I have ever had, and wouldn't call it an encounter per se. Anyway, I was a teenager at the time and was enjoying a late-season elk hunt in Washington State with my father. I don't recall the exact area, but it was in the foothills of the Cascades, northwest of the Yakima area. This was in mid-November or so, with a minor skiff of snow on the ground. Not enough to completely cover the ground. My dad and I set out from the truck in the early morning and followed a ridge line that was on one side of a natural bowl that had been logged a few years before. The ridge line was still treed and fairly dense until you reached the edge of the ridge. We decided to make our way to the bottom of the bowl and follow a road skid trail that went from the bottom to the top and try to push any hidden game towards my brother-in-law, who went around the other side of the bowl. It probably took us about 20 minutes to go from the ridge to the bottom. Halfway up the skid trail, we stopped to take a break. It was pretty steep in places, and watch for game sign. As I turned to look towards the bottom of the bowl, I glanced up towards where we had previously been and saw a dark humanoid shape moving at a speedy pace along the ridge line where we had come from. Now, it wasn't a hunter so far as I could tell. It had no hunter orange on or a discernible pattern of clothing. What was more impressive was the long gait of the figure as it rapidly moved along the edge of the trees. My younger mind told me it had to be a cross-country skier because of the gait and speed at which it was moving, but like I said, there wasn't near enough snow for a skier to be moving that quickly. The primary reason to believe it might be a skier was its smooth locomotion. The head and shoulders didn't appear to rise and fall as you might expect from a bipedal creature, especially one on the move like it was. It didn't look like a human on the run at all, and I had this uneasy feeling as I watched it cover the space of a quarter mile in what seemed like seconds. It continued on down the ridge until it disappeared from view, entering the trees. I remember sitting in stunned silence before we resumed our climb. At the time, I didn't mention it to my dad because I knew he would say it was just another hunter, but even to this day, I have very deep doubts about that possibility. I wish I had said something. I wish I had pointed it out. Maybe Harry and the Hendersons made too big an impact on me when I was a kid, but I feel I spotted a Sasquatch that day. Story 4. My best friend Rob and I do an annual hunting trip the third week of October every year for early deer season. We took a whole week off of work and set up camp to stay the full week. This is a very remote area in the northeast corner of Washington State in the mountains. We're the only people up there the entire week. It was 2017, and we arrived on a Saturday at our hunting spot and set up camp, which took a couple of hours. We use a big canvas hunting tent that we can both stay in with plenty of room to move around and store all of our gear. At some point the first day after we set up, I did a few tree knocks and a call to see if we might get a response. My buddy Rob was a skeptic at the time and had no interest in the Sasquatch thing whatsoever, but tolerated me doing it. We got nothing back and went on with our day and didn't give it another thought. We're there to hunt, so that's what we were focused on. As I remember, we went out the first afternoon to hunt for a few hours. and then returned back to camp after dark. Nothing happened out of the ordinary the first night. The next day we woke up early to get out to a spot to hunt for the day. That day we returned to camp early afternoon for lunch, and as we turned to head down the dirt path to our camp, we immediately noticed a small tree that was uprooted like a carrot and placed across the path. Rob and I looked at each other, and Rob said that wasn't there when we left this morning, and he was right, it wasn't there when we left. This was very weird, to say the least. I hopped out side by side to walk over and take a look. What we realized right away was that something had carried this tree and placed it there. There are no dirt drag marks like you'd see if someone or something had drug it in there. I picked up the tree and a bunch of dirt fell off the large root ball, and the small tree was fairly heavy. We proceeded to look around and inspect both tree lines on both sides of the path to see if we could find the source or a hole where it was pulled from. We looked around for 20 to 30 minutes and couldn't find anything. Something or someone carried that tree and placed it there. We took a few photos and carried on with our day. We decided to set up 2 game cameras in camp to hopefully catch anything that might be messing with us. When we were out hunting, we set up one behind our tent and one in the middle of our campsite, facing our camp table. We headed back out to hunt after lunch and again returned after dark. This is when the distant knock started. We hopped out of the vehicle and right away heard a distant knock, then another that sounded like it came from an opposite direction. Rob was scratching his head, wondering what could be making knocks in such a remote area in the mountains. We soon realized that this was some kind of a signal that would happen every night. A few days later, we returned back to camp after dark. As we turned down the entrance to our camp, we saw the second tree. Another tree was down in camp. We noticed it immediately. As we pulled in, this one was around 25 feet tall and very healthy. Rob hit it with his flashlight, and I snapped a couple of photos with my phone. This tree was big and it almost hit our camp table. There was no wind all that day. In fact, there was no wind the entire week. We couldn't believe this was happening. It was really hard for us to wrap our heads around it all. At this point, it really started to feel like we were in danger. If a tree that size was pushed over onto our tent at night, it could severely hurt us. We thought about this and talked about the possibility of this happening. As soon as we jumped out of the side-by-side, we heard a knock that sounded closer than the night before, then another from a different location. Again, it was like they, or whatever it was, were signaling or communicating in some way. A couple more knocks and then it stopped. Again, Rob and I were really on edge at this point, finding the trees and then hearing the knocks both nights when we arrived back to camp. We made a fire and carried on, fixed some dinner, and eventually went into the tent to go to bed. At some point later that night, Rob woke me up. The knocks had started again and were really loud and sounded very close. This was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and this would happen for multiple nights at approximately the same time. We decided we needed to exit the tent to try to see if we could see anything. So we got dressed as fast as we could, grabbed our sidearms, and ran out of the tent in opposite directions. We met with each other on the back side of the tent and scanned the woods with our flashlights. We stood there for a while quietly and just tried to listen. We stayed outside the tent for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, looking around the camp and talking about what was happening. We eventually went back into the tent and back to bed. On day 4, we slept in a little the next morning, since we didn't get much sleep during the night. I remember getting up tired and looking at the big tree that had been pushed over in the middle of our camp. Rob was also up, and he reminded me that we had set up one of the game cams in the middle of camp, and that I should have caught the tree going down the previous day. I'll never forget this. He walked over to the tree with the game cam and said, "Nate, get over here. You're not going to believe this." I walked over and he pointed at the game cam. Something had placed a dead moth backward and slightly squashed it over the eye of the camera. This seemed bizarre to both of us. We stood there confused for a few moments, and then Rob flicked the moth off of the camera and started to check it for any photos. The only thing we got was some really dark pictures, as if something was covering the lens, but nothing before or after these photos. The next night I was asleep, and Rob was still awake lying on his cot. He said he heard something moving around the tent. He then heard what he said sound like a stick being dragged all the way around on and across the tent until it reached his side. It went right by his head. He decided not to wake me up. This is very unsettling for me to hear. Every time we returned back to camp, multiple knocks from multiple areas would start. By the 6th night, we're both exhausted and stressed out from lack of sleep. To be honest, I was afraid to go to bed in the tent again, but reluctantly went to bed that night anticipating that we were going to get harassed and terrorized again. So we both had trouble going to sleep, even as tired as we were again. Around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we were woken up by the knocks. They were very loud and sounded like they were right behind the tent. Both of us were also angry at this point. We were both sleeping with our clothes on to be ready to go out of the tent faster if we had to. Again, we went out of the tent and in opposite directions. Around the tent, we stood there and didn't hear anything. Nothing was moving or running away. We scanned the forest with the flashlights again, and Rob caught some eye shine across the field that appeared to be fairly tall or high compared to the ground. We both shot our guns in that direction, thinking that maybe we'll scare it off, whatever it was. I'm not sure that was the smartest thing to do looking back on it, but we were desperate and wanted all this to stop. With our adrenaline still high, we stayed up for a while, but eventually went back in the tent and dozed off. At some point after all this, I woke up again and heard something growling right behind my corner of the tent, right behind my head. It was a loud, deep, guttural growl. I was terrified, and I lay there for a minute wondering if I had just dreamed this. Then it happened again. This time I woke Rob up. It happened again, 2 more times for a total of 4 growls. Rob heard it too. We rushed out of the tent again and saw or heard nothing. How could this be? How could something be that close to the tent, but it's not there? How could something move away so fast without us hearing it? Whatever this was, it seemed to have special abilities and was getting the best of us. We still had 1 more day and night to go on our trip, if we were to stick to our original plans. The next morning I checked the other game cam behind the tent, hoping that it had gone off and caught whatever was growling at us. There was a series of photos from that night that had a ghostly white mist in them, nothing else. That was probably a breath from something. We decided to call it and spend the last night at a family cabin on a lake around 30 minutes away from the hunting camp. We needed some sleep and we couldn't deal with it anymore. Each of those stories of possible Sasquatch encounters and sightings were in Washington State. According to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, it's a fact that for more than 400 years people have reported seeing large, hair-covered, man-like animals in the wilderness areas of North America. Sightings of these animals continue today. Real or not, these reports are often made by people of unimpeachable character. And for over 70 years, people have been finding, photographing, and casting sets of very large human-shaped tracks. Most are discovered by chance in remote areas. These tracks continue to be found to this day. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.